In today's breaking news episode, Ivan Demidov signs his entry-level contract with the Montreal Canadiens, and we break down what makes him so special as a talent and how he can contribute to the Montreal Canadiens' 2025 playoff dreams.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects. But on today's show, we're not talking about the 2025 draft. We're not talking about the USHL. We are talking about Ivan Demidov and the Montreal Canadiens because the hyper-skilled Russian winger has finally signed his entry-level contract in a shock move. He was able to negotiate with SKA St. Petersburg to let him go for the last 6 weeks of his contract. So rather than only being available to sign with the Montreal Canadiens on May 31st, it's happening today. It's happened on April 8th. Before the Montreal Canadiens' regular season has even ended, he will likely get into games before the season's even over. And then the playoffs are here, and adding a player of the caliber of Ivan Demidov, unless you're talking with the Mikko Rantanens of the world, you could not hope to add more talent on trade deadline day than the Montreal Canadiens have here with a player they drafted just about 8 or 9 months ago in Las Vegas, because Ivan Demidov is a game changer, and he's going to shift the way the Montreal Canadiens play hockey, much like Lane Hutson has so far in his young NHL career. But in the first segment here, we're going to talk about what makes Demidov so special, what his profile is as a player, and overall what his story has been this season. In the second segment, we're going to ask why he changes things so much for the Montreal Canadiens and what his impact will be on the playoffs this season. And finally, in the third segment, we're going to look a little bit ahead at what his career trajectory could look like and overall asking some questions as well for fan expectations. So we'll be inviting you, of course, to leave your comments down below because I'd love to interact with you after this episode goes up, because I have a feeling that we're going to have some relatively vocal Habs fans in the chat to discuss and break down this big signing. So let's just dive straight into this episode because it's a biggie. Ivan Demidov is, in my opinion, playing today, as of yesterday, the best player playing outside the NHL today. That's going to change. He's coming over to the National Hockey League, and he's going to be making an impact. And he's had a very, very big role to play in the KHL this season, playing with SKA St. Petersburg. This is one of the biggest teams in Russian hockey. A lot of ties to Russian oligarchs and to Vladimir Putin himself, who has multiple times made visits to the team and has had a couple handshake photos with team captain Alexander Nikishin, who is also on signing watch to go over to the Carolina Hurricanes. So another big name to keep an eye on there. But today we're focusing on Demidov. And this season, in the regular season in the KHL, he scored 19 goals and 48 points for 65 points. In a vacuum, this is already the most single season production from a U19 KHL player in history on its own, in terms of like D+1 and younger talents playing in this league ever before. No player has been able to outproduce Demidov, and this comes with a bunch of asterisks as well, because certain games Ivan Demidov played 27 minutes. Other games Ivan Demidov played 0 or 9 or 6. There was very little consistency for this player, both in line mates he was playing with this season and in minutes and consistent deployment. In the playoffs, you saw the entire range of that. In game 1, played 7 minutes in a series that they lost to Dynamo Moscow. In game 2, played 17, then 9 minutes, then 27, then 24, and then 16. There's a massive range in how this player was used, and all of this goes down to not how good he is on the ice, but overall the politics of playing younger players in Russian hockey and the overall politics of retaining control over tremendously talented players like Ivan Demidov, who, of course, was eyeing the NHL as a route, which he is now taking very clearly. But a lot of these politics were taking place in terms of him being benched, and in order to whittle his minutes down to convince him to extend his contract to stay in Russia, these tactics did not work for this player. Instead, he hung it out this season, played the weird minutes, played a lot some games, played not at all others, and overall was still able to be one of the most consistent offensive producers on his team this season, despite the most inconsistent deployment that a player could ask for. And I think with that situation and having started the season playing under 10, under 15 minutes every single game until the Montreal Canadiens went to visit SKA St. Petersburg back in, I believe it was December or January. And then all of a sudden, the absolute boom in terms of time on ice and in terms of consistency of deployment occurred. And that's where Demidov's production really blossomed this season. So even with the production being record breaking, there still are a lot of these things to acknowledge that he was limited in terms of what he was able to do on the ice with St. Petersburg this season. If he were given consistent top six deployment all season long, you're talking about a player that could very likely have reached a point a game tally in the KHL. And that is absurd. Just to kind of present how absurd that would be for a player this young to have an impact this big in a professional league like the KHL. Only 3 players have scored over a point a game in the entire KHL this season. Josh Levo and Nikita Gusev, 2 former NHL players, scored 69 and 80 points respectively, and Maxim Shabanov also had just 2 points over a point a game tally. So scoring a point a game is a rarity in the KHL, and Ivan Demidov would have pushed for that this season if he were given the minutes. And let's zoom out a little bit from pure production, because I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast and you're a Montreal Canadiens fan, if you've been on the Demidov watch this entire time, you know the numbers are insane. But what makes him so special? Well, it's Demidov's creativity, the unbridled nature of the creativity, high-end pace, high-end work ethic, very notably for a skilled winger, as well as an elite hockey brain. These are some commonalities that we've seen as well with what the Montreal Canadiens are building with the Habs. You see players like Lane Hutson, who is able to influence the game on his own as a rookie player already this season through his elite level intelligence, his agility, his deceptiveness, and his creativity and high-end playmaking abilities. These are all qualities that Ivan Demidov shares, but he's a forward, and I think there's another step up in terms of handling skill, in terms of deceptiveness, and in terms of goal scoring potential compared to a player like Lane Hutson. But those are 2 guys that are going to play tremendously well together in terms of rotations, understanding each other's movements. I think those 2 are going to be tied to each other's hips in offensive zone faceoffs and on the power play for decades to come. Exciting days are ahead here for the Habs, but where exactly might Ivan Demidov play in the Montreal Canadiens lineup? Because he's coming over to finish off the season here with the Habs, but the regular season isn't over yet, and the playoffs are looming. He's a rookie. He is a 19-year-old, and he has just played his first professional season this year. He had really no professional experience up until this season, apart from 4 or 5 games he got in last campaign at the very beginning of that season as well. I think that Demidov is going to be a shoe-in top 6 talent for the Habs here out of the gate. On the one hand, the Canadiens need that top 6 scoring depth. They have lacked that this season. It's been the top line doing all the work in the offensive zone. Caulfield, Suzuki, Slavkovsky are doing a lot of the burden in terms of scoring goals and in controlling shifts in the offensive zone. And then you have players like Patrick Laine, who can really contribute on the power play, but hasn't quite hit his stride in terms of even strength scoring just yet. Ivan Demidov, I think, could really help Laine access that even strength scoring a little bit more while playing with a player like Alex Newhook as well, a very pacey, high-speed centerman who's able to carry the puck in transition. I think those 3 players will mesh very nicely on a second line for the Habs, and I think that's the exact position where Demidov can hit the ground running a little bit. He won't be facing top-line matchups in terms of having to defend the elite players he faces in the first round, like your Alexander Ovechkins, for instance, but he will be able to get quite a few minutes in that top 6. I think the Montreal Canadiens are going to give him opportunities. If there's anybody that knows how talented this player is, it is that Montreal Canadiens coaching and management staff. From everything we've heard and seen from them since he was drafted, they are fully aware of the franchise potential that Ivan Demidov has. And we'll dig in a little bit more into that franchise potential and the overall impact that Demidov will be able to have at both even strength and on the power play, and where he should find himself on the power play, which unit fits best in the next segment. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. You just realized that your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to keep your job posts seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. I've been in that spot before where you just need the right candidate hired like yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a real setback. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come right in handy. They make sure that your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. All right, let's keep this episode rolling here in the second segment, chatting about Ivan Demidov and the Montreal Canadiens, because the outlook for this team and the overall look that the team is going into the playoffs with, I think, is shifting with the arrival of Ivan Demidov. This is the exact arrival the Habs have needed this season, and the exact arrival they need in order to get a boost when they're likely facing the President's Trophy challenging Washington Capitals in the first round, fresh off of Alexander Ovechkin's record-breaking goal tally, surpassing Wayne Gretzky to be the all-time leading goal scorer in league history. The Habs are going to need to generate something to upset a team of that quality that's had so many standout performances this season. Whether it's guys like Connor McMichael or Pierre-Luc Dubois or Alexei Protash down the middle, who have just had either resurging seasons in terms of offensive production or are really putting down a stamp and asserting themselves as top six caliber pieces in the National Hockey League this season. Or on the blue line, where you have the arrival of players like Jacob Chikrin that have just really changed the way that defensive core plays and the overall physicality and mobility that they show against defending the rush. There's a lot that Washington has going for them, but the Habs are going to have to make a push. And Ivan Demidov's a kind of player that can cut teams open and make something out of nothing. And that's exactly what the Habs are going to need if they want to have an upset here in round one of the playoffs. And I think that he's going to have an immense impact on how the Habs play for a very, very long time, potentially starting as soon as next week in the regular season. A lot is possible here for Ivan Demidov, and so much of this goes down to how he plays the game. As I alluded to in the first segment, this is not a raw, just skill player that can just dangle around opponents and it's all skill and that's how he makes things happen. There's so much more nuance to his game that makes him not just a tremendously skilled player, but a very projectable one to break down NHL defenses and to keep up with the NHL pace of play as well. He's a heart and soul kind of player. The work ethic, the intensity, the forechecking ability as well. In important games when he knows he needs to work, he works. This is a player who leaves everything on the ice when things matter. Sure, we've seen Demidov a little bit disengaged at points this season, but this has been while playing for an organization that is not giving him anything consistently, is trying to coerce him into signing a contract and not giving him minutes. Of course, there's going to be some games where the energy isn't the same quite level. But overall this year, I still saw a player that had a real fire lit under him, working hard, trying to change his game, evolve. A lot of like exploring discomfort this season for Demidov in terms of trying things that he hasn't tried before and overall trying to expand his game. He's so explorative in his play on the puck, but his off puck play is so intelligent. His ability to find soft pockets of space. He's a very supportive player in his off puck routes and his off puck movements. He doesn't passively stay on the boards and wait for the puck to come to him. He tries to get involved in play even when the puck isn't on his stick. He's open as an outlet option when teammates are under pressure with the puck on their sticks. And overall, he's a player who plays with pace and intensity and unbridled skill. The skill, of course, is the thing to write home about with this player because boy, oh boy, the handling skill, the creativity, the unorthodox 10 and 2 maneuver usage, which is when you point your toes in opposite directions at skating on the ice, which allows you to really go a lot laterally. And Lane Hudson implements 10 and 2 maneuvers into his rushes, but it's more like split second 10 and 2 to basically make a forechecker bite to make them think that he's going for a drop pass or going back the other direction before just keeping on rolling in a straight line. There's a step to their deceptive qualities to using 10 and 2 maneuvers. But Ivan Demidov last season seemingly only used 2 and 2. 10-2 maneuvers in the offensive zone playing against junior competition as a draft year. And this season has used them less, but a lot more proactively and strategically. And it makes him one of the more unpredictable players and very, very unorthodox, very different style of player to defend against. Teams and players in the NHL are going to have to learn new strategies to defend against a player like Ivan Demidov, much as they've had to adapt to Lane Hutson this season. And the parallels between those two players do just keep going in my eyes in terms of how the intelligence and intensity complement just the game-breaking skill and creativity. Those two players, I think, are going to be fantastic working alongside each other for years to come. But with Demidov, of course, you have separation level handling skill. I think in terms of skating, you still want to work on the explosiveness a little bit. That just two-step acceleration could still use a little bit of work. Like, he's not the player that's going to separate himself for breakaways all the time, like to slow play down a little bit too at times, but still a guy that with that physical work that he can still do in terms of elevating his stride mechanics and his overall power generation in his lower body. This is a guy who's going to be incredibly difficult to contain and to catch for opposing defenders because he is just so slippery. And when you have that slipperiness, like we've seen with Lane Hutson this season, and you add in elite level vision, finding teammates in the offensive zone, and high-end deceptive abilities, making defenders miss, taking no-look passes, just completely manipulating players and opening up chasms of space in the middle of the ice. Demidov can do it all. He's so creative. He's so intelligent. This is a special talent. I'm very excited to watch him play in the NHL. I'm going to be able to watch him live as well before season's end, as I'm going to the season finale against the Carolina Hurricanes here in Montreal. But with his pace pushing play, I think that Ivan Demidov is going to hit the ground running in the National Hockey League. And while it's going to be an adjustment to the playoff pace and the playoff intensity, I think he's going to play a key role in helping the Canadiens progress through a round of the playoffs if they end up being able to do so. But that wraps things up here for our second segment. In the final one, we're going to wrap up the show talking about Ivan Demidov's outlook for his career moving forward, how he's going to fit in terms of the contract situation in Montreal, as well as some questions for you fans and what your takeaways are here and your hopes are for Ivan Demidov. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and can save some more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan your long-term goals. Take control of your finances at Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment, talking about Ivan Demidov, the Montreal Canadiens, and the overall role that this signing is going to have on not just the short-term successes of this team, but the medium and long-term ones as well. I think Demidov is going to be potentially the most important player for the Habs of this generation of players. A couple other contenders for that role, but I think he's well in that running. This season, I think it's really been Nick Suzuki and Lane Hutson who have taken the mantle as the Montreal Canadiens leaders in terms of being the most important players in all three zones in all three periods of the game. But Ivan Demidov, with his control over the offensive flow and his ability to just completely control the pace of play for his team, it's one of a kind in the Montreal Canadiens system among forward prospects. I think Lane Hutson has flashes of that on the blue line end, but this is an ability that is so difficult to acquire on the trade market in free agency at the National Hockey League level. This is built through the draft, and Lane Hutson and Ivan Demidov are going to be key cornerstones of this team long term. And with Demidov, in terms of just the insane amount of skill he's able to pack into offensive sequences and make defenders miss and just provide reliable dynamism and inside driven incisive dynamism to dangerous areas, whether it's for him to get a shot off or for a teammate. There's just so much that he throws at the opposition that's so difficult to just contain. I think Ivan Demidov is going to show his value from day one with the Montreal Canadiens, and you're going to see him show flashes of dynamic skill with the puck that no player on the Habs, apart from maybe Lane Hutson, can match. I think you're going to see these flashes of skill from very, very early on, but what will have to be built over the course of his first, second, and third seasons in the National Hockey League will be the overall supportive habits. You're going to see some incongruencies. You're going to see him be in the wrong spot at the wrong time in the defensive zone. There being some, I guess, miscues as well in transition. But overall, I think he's going to catch himself very quickly and find momentum in terms of generating offense at a pretty high pace at a very, very early point in his career, as early as the end of this regular season or these playoffs, because he has all of these intensely elite level tools paired with the intensely elite high level brain. All of this just works together for a incredibly fluid thing to watch on the ice. He's like a ballerina when things are working for him on the ice. He's so much fun to watch. And to bring you back to what I wrote about Ivan Demidov at the end of his draft year campaign, this is the section that I wrote for Ivan Demidov in our 2024 draft guide at Dobber Prospects when Hattie Kalikesh and I were still working there. And Ivan Demidov ended up as the second highest player on our board all season long. Nothing shifted all year long. What I wrote was, a fantastically creative, dynamic, intelligent, and potent winger, Ivan Demidov could develop into a perennial top 10 scorer league-wide. He finds highly effective yet stunningly creative solutions to many problems he encounters and leverages the variety of elite tools to do so, relying less and less on the handling to do all the heavy lifting for him. He's a very active player off puck, prodding for holes and riding blind spots, even possessing a plus-level motor on both sides of the puck and a desire to get engaged defensively. But it's with the puck on his stick that he shines the brightest. Featuring a near Datsukian flair, Demidov can dissect defenses all on his own, though he favors possession over trying to do so regularly. He's the best puck handler we've scouted in the past 3 drafts, Bedard included. This stands true as well today in terms of looking at the 2025 draft class. You can extend that to 4 draft classes where Demidov is, in my opinion, the most fantastic puck handler to come out of those years. He's an unconventional skater with subpar stride mechanics, but his favorite 10-2 skating style gives him a tremendous amount of lateral mobility and deception, allowing him to escape small ice situation with possession against all odds. Add to this a high-end goal-scoring toolkit, even better playmaking skill and habits, and an ability to elevate the players around him, and you have a unique player with sky-high upside, potentially even surpassing that of Macklin Celebrini. His KHL contract is up in a year, and he has been very vocal about his desire to pursue his lifelong NHL dream, which he has now done. While being stuck against far inferior MHL competition isn't ideal this season, and that may remain the case next season, thankfully that was not the case, and he did play in the KHL. He has found ways to challenge himself at that level by forcing himself to find complex solutions to simple problems he encounters. If he drops outside the top 3, a franchise will have a steal on their hands very early on draft day. The Montreal Canadiens got that steal. The Montreal Canadiens have a franchise-level talent in their system, and he is making his NHL debut very, very soon, having signed his entry-level contract here. And I'm very, very excited to see what the future has in store because, again, this is, in terms of just biasly growing up a Habs fan and being so immersed in the hockey world as I am with my work, Ivan Demidov has been one of the players I've most enjoyed watching in the past 5 years. At the NHL, PWHL, whatever level of hockey you want to include, Ivan Demidov has been one of the most electrifying talents to watch on the ice that I have been able to watch over the past couple seasons. And every single time I tune back in, I notice details in his game that add more nuance. There's so much to look at with his game. The more you dig, the more you find. I think Habs fans are going to be introduced to this with this player over the coming weeks and months and years. There's always something new to find to appreciate in what he brings. I think he's going to be a fan favorite. I think he's going to be even a media favorite because he's going to bring the game-breaking offense without sacrificing the work rate, the intensity, and the defensive engagement. There's so much to love with this player, how he plays on the ice, and with the flair and skill he has with the puck on his stick, he's a true artist on the ice. So very excited to watch him play myself, but I'd love to hear from you as well. What have your thoughts been on Ivan Demidov's progression in this season? What are your hopes for him in the coming seasons? And how big of an impact do you think he'll be able to have on the Montreal Canadiens playoff streams as soon as this season? What role will he be playing? Is he going to be a point-a-game guy, or is he going to just get used to the NHL pace? I'd love to hear from your opinions down below in the comments. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. We always appreciate our everydayers here on the podcast. And for your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything you could possibly want to know to build yourself a contending team, and a sustainable one at that, for your fantasy leagues. But that wraps things up here for us today. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I'm your host, Sebastian High, and I hope to catch you listening again very, very shortly.